stand to my feet now because Queen, do I need to stand up now? And there you go.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you, kind sir?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
Good. Thanks for asking.
Fantastic, fantastic. Here we are, season 2 now. Chatting with Clay. Incredible, right?
Yes, it is.
Incredible.
Season 2. Wow.
Certainly, certainly. And I think we would be shortchanging the beginning of the second season by not acknowledging Deacon William Burt, your director of media ministries at Miracle Central Church, who is doing such an outstanding job. He put together a phenomenal compilation of some of the highlights from season 1. So I was really, really enjoying that. And I'm so excited just to look back upon some of the episodes and now transition into the second season of Chatting with the Clays. And, you know, the people are talking, the people are enjoying this, and we're going to keep it going as long as it's a blessing to someone. I think it's certainly worth our time and energy. So I wanted to kick off this season 2, Mom and Dad, with a sort of interesting topic, which I would theme, if you will, the leadership toolbox. The leadership toolbox. And where I'm coming from with this thought and theme as we continue our conversations and just reflection on life, reflections on ministry, reflections on leadership, reflections on family, and all the other things that we do, I was thinking, and I don't know if it hit you the same way it hit me, we are already halfway through with 2020.
Right.
We are halfway done with this year. And it seems like we keep talking about 2020 like it hasn't happened yet, or like we're in February or something. We're halfway done with the year. We're over the halfway mark. And I think this is certainly a good time on Chatting with the Clays to sort of think about some of the lessons learned and some of the skills gained and some of the tools we pulled out. So with no further ado, let's talk about the leadership toolbox. So I hear Dad continue to say and reference, and I think he's absolutely spot on, that from the 2 big storms that are going on, there's going to be a great revival. But to think about this on the individual level is to reflect on what we've gained, what we've learned, ways that we've become stronger, and continue to use those well and keep those things in our toolbox. So if you think about it, could you, in a moment, each of you, provide an example of a tool that you have used during 2020 that, let's just call it a new tool that's in your toolbox? Is there a particular tool that you have utilized in 2020 as a leader that you've put in your toolbox?
Wow. I don't know. I need a minute to think about that. I have so many tools
Yeah, what just
that I've had to rely on.
Mm-hmm.
Man. And you said leadership. I mean, for me, it's been leadership. You know, really digging down to find that leadership skill on the inside, knowing that people are just really relying on you at this time to kind of pull them through the storms that we're facing. So, you know, with leadership, when I think of leadership, I think of strength, really, because you have to lead with strength. You know, even in your weak times, even if you're going through a personal crisis, the people always have to see you as strength because they have to trust you. They have to have faith in you. You know, when you're the leader, so they have to be able to trust you. So maybe that strength, maybe too. You know.
Excellent. Yeah. May I unpack that a little bit? When you say strength, is there a particular kind of strength that you have found yourself exercising in 2020?
And was that question to me or?
Yes.
Oh,
I just want to unpack your answer a little bit further.
Oh, yes. Was there a particular kind? Yes. Again, that your trust, you really knowing where you stand with God, really trusting in God. You know, that's been really put to the test. Do I really trust God? You know, and unpacking that, the trust you have, the strength you have, and probably somewhere in there, just to have that even fearlessness. I don't know if that kind of,
Yes, spot on.
you know, rolls on, but yeah, you have to be fearless in leadership because you have to be the one to forge the unknowns before you can tell the people, come on, you know, let's go. It's kind of like you have to be like one of those spies and spy out the country, spy out what's before you, and before you can tell the people to lead. So just really, you know, and me being the first lady of the pastor's wife, just really being in sync with his thoughts, being in sync with where he's going, being in sync with the program, you know, what he's planning, and just, you know, again, praying him through and pushing him through too, because it's really been a trying time. And when you say leadership, this has really been about, for us as leaders, being in this together.
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. So Dad, I pose the same question to you. Reflecting a little bit on 2020, what is a particular tool in your leadership toolbox? You can call it what you want. It could be a phrase, it could be a summation of a thought, but what is a particular tool that you would consider slightly new in 2020 that you've used as a leader?
Giving support to others, giving support to those that are working behind the scenes and their ideas. Leader, I've always known, and I haven't practiced anything different, but actually getting into the mind of those that are the behind the scenes workers. The church that we daily go to or work out of, ministries, you understand that there might be some resources right there that you have not tapped into. So mine has been opening up my mind and opening up myself and letting what I call the engineering crew, let them know that you're the reason and you're the cause for us going forward in the area. You, the behind the scenes workers, are pushing me to do what God has anointed me to do. And knowing that, you have to understand that the pastors don't have all of the answers. We don't have all of the abilities. And so as a leader, a good leader will understand that I may not know what to do, but God has given me the people to get the job done. And so the churches are built around the pastor. Now, and God forbid that we take any glory from God. But when God sends the pastor and the pastor's there, then God will send us help. The pastor has to understand the workers around him and let them flow. Talk to them, seeing what they're thinking. And sometimes I found out that this group at Miracle Central, including yourself, have pushed me in a place and a level that I really said that I would not do. Now, I'll admit it. I said this online viewing things, I said, oh, I ain't gonna mess with that. Because I'm an evangelist. I'm a teacher. So I'll preach and work. I may preach an hour and I work the altar for 2 hours. I'm an altar worker. You know, I'm the one that I love to birth souls off the altar. So all this online viewing stuff, I said no. But because of the circumstances in leadership, I really had to support all of those around me with their ideas. And I had to wrap my brain around where they're trying to take me. And praise be to God. Now, and I don't know about other pastors and ministries, but I will admit this was out of my comfort zone. Wow. And as pastors, we preach and tell people, God is moving you out of your comfort zone and whatnot. But God will also move the pastor out of his comfort zone. See, every now and then you got to eat your own cooking. So I've been feeding, and I've been feeding everybody, but it's like now they said, Pastor, you sit down and why don't you eat your food?
There you go.
So I had to eat my own cooking. So that's what I learned, is being a supporter of other ideas. And really, those that are viewing us and seeing this, it's not me. It's those that you don't see. I'm the one in the camera, but it's all of those behind the scenes. They are the ones that are pushing it and pushing me. And so I thank God. So, we have to learn, when God sends you help, use them.
Yes.
And I don't have to be, any leader, any pastor that really, thinking it doesn't move without him. I understand that concept because the church is built around the pastor. But the leader has to know. He has to know, how to let go. And I will admit, and I will pass it, I will admit that I have been hard on these engineers. I've been hard on them. But they tell me, Pastor, go this way. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. Like yourself. And you're like, Dad, and you're so nice. You just nice.
Me?
What are you doing? Me? You're so nice. And it's been hard. So I thank God for y'all's patience. So I would say supporters of others' ideas. That's what I have really learned.
Absolutely. Those are great and thoughtful responses. It takes a lot for leaders to be in a situation, like you said, where you're in the wilderness with the people. It's interesting. And we've talked about Moses a lot. I've heard a lot of preaching and you've preached as well, covering the topic of Moses and pieces of the experience of him leading the Hebrew nation from slavery through the wilderness. It's really peculiar that Moses didn't go through the wilderness first and come back and say, all right, everybody, I think I can lead you through this. I figured this thing out. Moses had to be with the people and the people had to be with Moses, and that experience needed to be welded together because the shepherd, has to maintain that pulse on the flock. And at the same time, there's a certain level of development and growth in the shepherd while the flock is changing. Thinking about parenting, one of the episodes that we had in Chatting with Clay season 1 was about parenting adults. And as parents, I'm watching my son, at 2 years old, approaching 3 in a few months. I'm watching his growth and development, which has changed the requirements of me, the backbone. And actually, I've been told for a good portion of my life that maybe it wasn't a bone, maybe it was gristle, that we have in our body at a certain age, and bone comes later. I don't know anatomically that's accurate, but I've heard, that You don't have bones, you have gristle. You're too young to have bones.
Right.
Now the bones are saying at a fine 36 years of age, crawling on all fours for extended periods of time with a 2-year-old on your back, wrestling, grappling, rolling, getting ready to fall, getting ready to shatter every bone in his body in 5 seconds, that has brought something forth different out of me, as a parent. And watching the growth and development in him as well. But as that analogy parallels with Moses and parallels with where we're at, I think that says a lot, that a leader still finds opportunity to grow, because as long as the leader is still growing, the flock is still growing.
Right.
And I think that's fantastic to see you all continue to mature and grow and see these particular tools be valuable to you. I think, there beckons a comparison, as you talked about your production team, who is helping you broadcast and put together some content delivered online, whereas the preference would have been in person. There's certainly a lot of perks, and there's certainly a lot of outreach that in evangelism that has been accomplished with this tool. And as you said, Dad, you're an evangelist, and you have a very powerful tool. You have a powerful amplifier in front of you to get that gospel out. So this is exactly the tool that would be perfect for someone like you. You care about reaching people, reaching the lost, the disenfranchised, the unchurched, those that have been hurt by a church. And maybe this has been the most comfortable way for them to gradually come back into a joint fitting with the body. This is the perfect tool for an evangelist, although it's not necessarily the tool you would have went for in the store shelves at Menards or Home Depot or Lowe's. So I think that's fantastic. It brings to my mind Ecclesiastes 9 and 10. Whatever you find to do with your hands, do it with all of your might. And man, we found this thing, didn't we? It wasn't necessarily sitting on the nightstand. It wasn't in the garage. We had to go find a tool to be able to figure out, how to serve God's people. And I think that's
right.
Let me continue on with my second question. Have there been new applications to old tools that you've discovered? And again, we're using this tool thing as a metaphor. The thought and the theme today is the leadership toolbox here in season 2 of Chatting with the Clays. So first question was, have there been new tools that you as leaders have discovered and added to your toolbox? My second question is, have you found a new application to an old tool during this time?
Indeed. Indeed. A new application, oh yes. Even to the voice, again, teaching and things just, I know I teach the missionaries class in Sunday school, and now we have gone to Zoom, like, so many people, the Zoom platform and teaching. And it may not seem like it, but again, once you're, at least for me, being in the physical classroom and being on Zoom is really different. Some of the participants aren't able to be on the actual view of Zoom, so they call in, and just, that not being able to see the physical reaction, read the body language when people are saying something. I'm a reader, I know I'm a reader, and this has really made me even more aware of how much I am a reader, and I do pay attention, one thing, there's 2 things I learned from my father growing up, is to be a good listener. And he would always say to us as children, you don't have to talk all the time. Sometimes the answer is what's not said. And it's better to be a better listener than it is to know everything and talk all the time. And then we were also taught to look someone in the eye when they're talking to you. And so that's really been different. You have to learn how to read in a different way, how to read people in a different way. Everything's not always a spiritual thing when it comes to church. The scripture even let us know it's first natural then spiritual. So it's not always spiritual. So when I talk about reading, I don't mean in the spiritual sense, but I mean in the natural sense, because you get that personal feel when you're physically in the room with someone, and you can feel the vibes of people. You can see, again, in their body language. And it's really much, much more different than it is being on Zoom or being on a audio call. So, to me, that's the newness of the old tool. I've learned how to listen in a different way. And I've learned how to even see, even watch in a different way.
Absolutely. And that's interesting, Mom, because when you say listening, and especially as you hint at the application of the virtual medium, listening becomes different and listening becomes global in the virtual space versus the physical space. I think it was Martin Luther King who said that Sunday morning is the most segregated time, the most segregated hour in America. So in many instances, spiritually, we haven't necessarily been globally listening in the Sunday morning in the church-bound setting, because we have been focused on our congregation in our particular community, and a lot of that tends to follow sort of cultural and ethnic lines, oftentimes, not completely exclusively, but often. And now, especially being in the virtual space, everyone is now having access to conversations that they may not naturally stumble upon. So the kind of listening that I imagine you all are even doing now carries. And I know you all are readers and you all continue to stay in tune with the news and other perspectives and other voices and trying to keep pulse with different issues. But I think now it's been exacerbated, and there has been now, going to this virtual space, a broader conversation that's opened up. So I find that really interesting to hear you speak about listening, and again, figuring out how to do the teaching, and have that interaction, across virtual spaces and some of those boundaries. But those are certainly old tools with new application. I think that's really interesting. Dad, how about you? An old tool that you may have found a new application for in 2020?
Leaders, and I was looking at Moses. Effective leaders delegate, and something that you shared with me years ago, and I'm one that where I am in tune with my children. My children represent a different generation, and I know my generation. And so for me, to be effective in what I do, I have to look through the lenses of other generations. And I have to, I need to plug in. And so you told me something once, and it really makes sense to me, is, and then we talk about the job that you do, and excuse me, that you have to trust other people with, as you give them something to do, you have to allow the people to even to make a mistake. And so one of the tools that I again use and have is that to be an effective leader, leaders delegate. And Moses had to learn management skills. He had to learn a management lesson.
Yes.
And so what I've done, I'm looking at Monday, your mother teaches the missionaries. Tuesday, we have what we call Tuesday night Sunday school. Wednesday, we're live with the Bible studies on Wednesday at 6. Thursday, we have corporate prayer at 6 o'clock. Friday, we're here live again in Bible Institute. Saturday, I'm preparing for Sunday. Sunday at 11 o'clock, we're live live streaming, and then at 1:30. Literally, we are working 7 days a week, putting out ministry, doing ministry through the live viewing. And so I had to learn, even though sometimes the pastor will kind of cringe as you let loose those to do ministry, because I believe God always gets the best. And for instance, I'll use myself. I know I have the calling of an evangelist. I have the calling of a teacher. And so, God uses me in the office of a pastor. So when you have that, and I'm saying you want to give God the best, well, because things are new and we really had to turn on a dime to keep doing ministry, I had to trust those to make mistakes, without, what I want to say, blowing the fuse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been difficult. That's been very difficult. So effective leaders, we delegate, and as Moses, we had to learn management lessons. And so that's something that I've had to learn. And yes, there's people have dropped the ball. We can say dropped the ball, or they didn't put, I believe, as much energy that I thought they could have done. But you have to give people a chance, And so it's really been a very learning thing. Let me say it like this, and I use you. When you started to walk, I don't think you remember this.
No.
When you left crawling to walking, the thing that I had to be protective of you is that you wouldn't hit your head. I really wasn't concerned about your knees, your elbows, your legs, or your arms, but I didn't want you to damage your cranium. So as you started walking, and I saw at a point that you started kind of getting fearful. When you thought you was going to fall, and it scared you, and you kind of stopped, but then you moved again. So I kind of was able to relax myself, because you understand. You start to understand when you was about to go out of control. So once you learn that part, I let you go. And even though you did fall, you didn't fall and hit your head and hurt yourself. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in a very, very interesting way, you all have actually tied together sort of concepts that are interconnected, intervenous in the new tools and the application of old tools. In the new tools, Mom spoke about a new way of trusting God, a new situation and circumstance to apply trusting God, and a different type of trust, a different flavor of trust that was needed. And here, Dad, you speak about trusting God through trusting the people and the resources and the help that He's put around you, and trusting that the vision you've laid out being executed with the experience and the skill of the staff that you have working with you has been also a anchor to 2020. So that trust theme has actually sort of anchored both sides of new tool and application of old tool, and I certainly see that connection. And I think it's absolutely apropos to consider now that if we're seeing tools, both new tools added and old tools added, we have to also talk about relationships in this conversation of the leadership toolbox, because relationships are resources and relationships are absolutely tools. So I think you all have served this up and set it up perfectly. But what has changed And what have you learned, if anything, about relationships specific to the two of you, relationships you maintain? And let's, for a second, put on the shelf, the social distancing, which I think, is clearly widely known and understood to be a big impact of 2020. We don't get the face-to-face, we don't get to be in the same room. But if we put that just on the shelf for a second, what else have you all noticed and learned about relationships? Are the same people who, well, there I go. I was going to serve you some answers. So let me just leave that open-ended. And Dad, let's pick right back up with you, and then we'll take the question to Mom. We'll go in reverse order here.
Okay. And that question again is,
what have we learned about relationships as tools during 2020? Let's see, there's something new, ways that they've changed. That could be all sorts of things. I'm trying not to lead you down a particular direction, but I'm curious to see if you'll go there anyway.
When you are put in a position to where you are in an area of unknown, people you have with you are in the area of unknown. But as a leader, even though you're in an area of unknown, you have to make sure that you project the knowledge of the unknown. You have to be aware of that. I know it's an unknown thing, but because I have the knowledge of that, we can yet navigate through the unknown.
Okay.
You have to encourage other people that even though that their leader is uncomfortable, don't let your leader, as he knows he's uncomfortable, she's uncomfortable, you can be yet uncomfortable and yet get the job done. I'm looking at, when you look at success is only acknowledged, or you're aware of success is after you've been through. You have time to now look at hindsight. That's the only way you can gauge success, is after you went through something. So for the first part of this year, we were dealing with the unknown. I'm looking at people that are looking at me and say, well, Pastor, this is unknown to you and it's unknown to me, but I had to keep encouraging them that we're going to get through and you are doing a great job. Do you know how to do it? No. What's the outcome? Don't know. But yet, we're going to get through this. So it's actually, what I've learned is, as I'm being stretched as a leader, I can stretch you also, and both of us don't know what we're doing. Now, how can you stretch somebody else in the unknown and you don't even know? It's possible. I can stretch, even though I don't know what to do. I can, when I may stretch, I can tell you that you can do this. I can encourage you. I can push you. We can get this job done, even though I don't know what I'm doing myself. Now, that might sound kind of strange, but that's what Moses had. Moses was at the place of unknown, a lot of unknowns. And at the time that he was working through the unknown, God did not talk to Moses. God talks to his father-in-law and says, I want you to tell Moses, you're killing yourself. Not good for you, not good for the people. Now, why didn't God directly, because of the relationship, how come he didn't tell Moses? God told his father-in-law. And with that is, there was no second guessing. When his father-in-law spoke unto him, evidently, his father-in-law did have a relationship with him to where he would listen. Watch this. How often does God talk to us and we don't know that it's God talking to us? So God will stretch us, and sometimes we're thinking it's the devil talking to us. Well, with this case, Moses couldn't second guess him walking through the unknown because physically right with him, his father-in-law speaks. His father-in-law speaks the words that God told him to speak to Moses. That way Moses wouldn't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out if it's who's talking to him. Okay.
So at that point, allow me to infer a little bit and correct me if I'm off. So in the context of relationships, it sounds like you may be saying you and the people aren't as far apart as people might perceive. Because as you said, you're going through an unknown just as the people you're leading are going through the unknown. So sometimes there is this perspective between the body and the leader of saying, this leader is in a different place than I am. You can have confidence, you can have faith, you can have reassurance because you're in a different place than I am in this. And I hear you saying, we're actually in the exact same place. It's unknown to you, it's unknown to me. It's uncomfortable for you, it's uncomfortable for me. But even still, the leader being so closely acquainted to where the people are, that leader is actually able to push the people forward into their next level of growth and development because they know exactly where the people are. They have that pulse.
Right. Right. And this is even what we're dealing with, what I call is trench work ministry. We're all in the trenches together. And then even though we're in the trenches together, you have a general, you got a colonel, you got a captain, you got a sergeant, you got whatever the pecking order is in leadership. But we're in this together.
Yes, absolutely. That reminds me of when Jesus was in the ship with the disciples in the middle of the storm, and it's been preached and preached and preached and preached, and there'll be tons of more preaching to come. But it's interesting that Jesus was acquainted with the storm in the same ship, in the same storm as the disciples. However, his response was different than theirs. He could respond different because he knew what they were feeling and what they were experiencing. And sometimes people think you're responding different than me because there's a misunderstanding somewhere between me and you of what I'm going through. You can act like that, and you can feel that way, and you could smile and you can praise God and you can laugh and you can be encouraged because you're delusional clearly, or maybe I'm missing something. But what you're actually saying is we're in the same storm, we're in the same ship, but we're in different places. We're experiencing things at two different levels.
And with that is, the disciples and Jesus knew about the law of gravity. But what was the disconnect was Jesus is the Lord over the law of gravity.
Yes, there you go. There you go. You watch that. You put that one in your pocket, sir. That's that one's smoking. Mom, jump in here. Hurry up and jump in. I can see his chair vibrate. He about to float off this board. That's powerful, Dad. That's powerful. So, Mom, again, that question is, we know relationships are resources, relationships are tools. So in the year 2020, what have you learned? What are you experiencing maybe that's a little bit different, or maybe you're relearning as it relates to relationships?
Yeah.
From that leadership perspective.
I think this really has exposed a lot of relationships.
Wow.
It has really exposed it. And I know a lot of times when we say expose, the connotation to expose is negative.
Right.
And I don't mean it in the negative. It just has exposed, it's really shown a lot of things. And again, you see you see things that you didn't see before in people. And then the things that you thought were there, you don't necessarily see either. So, it has exposed a lot in a lot of different ways. The exposure has shown where the strength is in the building, if I can say it that way. We know that a building is built and there are, I call it the plumb line, but probably the carpenter will call it, what is the main frame supported by? Your beams, and the beams have to be the foundation. The two things about a building: the foundation has to be strong, and the beams have to be strong. And those beams are supported upon the foundation. So again, that's why leadership has to be strong at this time and can't show a weakness. However, the beams, that thing that the foundation is relying on to hold everything up has to be strong. And I think during this time, a lot of that has been exposed for the good too. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've taken out of this to this point. Just seeing the different things. And on the spiritual side, I've been praying a lot, and I'm like, Lord, out of this, where are the ministries? Where are the ministries to be birthed out of this? Because I can't believe that, and I say it in the eye, not the spiritual. We go through a time and there's something that's not supposed to be birthed through it. The church is always a birthing source. So there's, even in the bad times, good is birthed. Even in the good times, good is birthed. But where I'm waiting to see, and I'm listening for the births.
Absolutely. No, that's really, really powerful. I have been talking to some people, and actually Karen and I were talking, and I'm a person that has probably, and by virtue of what I do and what I believe in, how I try to lead my life, probably a really, really big network of people I'm connected to. But I use the word network and then I use friend very carefully. And I think in many instances, you probably would think about this being a time where you and the people you're closest to being on the phone all the time, connecting, video conferencing with one another. And to some extent, and I only speak for myself, I'm not saying this is going to be the trend of the case with people, but you brought this to my mind. To some extent, the people I'm close with, I've connected with in some unique ways virtually because I can't physically get to see them. But to your point, Mom, of the exposure that's been brought to relationships, there have been relationships that I've learned more about because they weren't prominent prior to 2020, but the conditions of 2020 let me know that there are some people who are really, really in my corner. There's some people who really, really think about me and care and are concerned. And those aren't necessarily people that I would have thought about, being at that level of commitment to me, if that makes sense. So exactly. It has been some exposure because you do have the people who are high touch, high interaction. And then there's a group of people that really have your back, people who really support you, think about you, pray for you, and they surface as well. And I try to be that same thing to other people. I'm not, and Karen will tell you, I'm not on the phone every day with my friends. I'm not even texting or on social media with my friends a lot. That's not my lifestyle. That's not how I am. I'm attentive, to living life, and I'm not always plugged into interacting and engaging. But hopefully those that I care about have seen the same thing from me, where I've reached out on occasion, maybe once during the home pandemic, maybe a couple times, and maybe I'm praying and I'll let somebody know later. But the exposure of my concern has probably came a little bit different to other people in 2020. So I think that's interesting that you point to that. And the same thing with beams and foundation. There are people I've seen step forward in ministry in unique ways that don't carry the look that we're normally used to.
Right.
People aren't necessarily waiting to grab a microphone in a pulpit to say, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, I care about the welfare of others. I've known people who have done so many things behind the scenes as relates to taking other people shopping and going up and down their block, you know, looking after and taking care of senior citizens who they know live on their own, you know, those kind of things. And when we talk about the great revival in the ministries, you know, that are coming out of this pandemic, I think that absolutely is happening, but it's happening on the level that it's needed, which isn't necessarily visible. And then vice versa. And I'll throw this one to you all for reaction. I've seen a lot of people getting in front of a camera online just cause. And there are a lot of people who are stepping forward, and sure, that's totally fine with me. There's plenty of lost souls out there. There are plenty of people who need encouragement. There are plenty of people who need to hear personal testimonies, and they're strengthened by that. So I think there's space for many more people to step forward. But I have seen, you know, this group of folks who have stepped forward in front of a camera during this time, and the way that it comes across is a little bit different, and it's a little bit difficult to swallow, at least for my particular taste. So I think there is some exposure as well, because some folks, you know, they see ministry only as being in the pulpit or utilizing the camera as their pulpit, when there might be opportunities, you know, to do some things that are less visible but more impactful. So it's interesting to see where we're going to land after all of this. How many people keep that momentum and that energy going? How many people are going to continue to do those behind the scenes things that we know are impactful, but you're not going to get credit and 1,000 views and 1,000 likes for it, but it is life changing and world changing to the individuals that you're reaching? And then how many people are going to just stay in front of the camera and bypass the opportunities before them every single day to really make an impact? And I'm not inferring that being on the camera means you're not doing anything else, but I'm just saying sometimes we run to the microphone and we step over a lot of people that are hurting and in need along the way. Yeah. So thoughts or reactions to that?
Go ahead.
And that's so true. Again, you touched on a lot of different nerves here, but in a good way. Again, I think we've seen, and I've seen a lot of people that I thought wasn't really paying attention to detail, if I can say it that way. And they have been huge right now and very solid in what they're doing behind the scenes. And then a lot of people that, like you said, were like up on you, up in your face, so to speak. It's like, where are they? You know. So again, the exposure, it's been interesting. It's been really interesting, and God has revealed some things, and He's brought people, new people, even, you know, to even encourage us and encourage the ministry and things. So it's been a trying time. It's, you know, like I said, I'm sure there'll be plenty of books written if the world continues after all this. There'll be plenty of books written from people about their personal experiences through all of this, because it's been very different. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of religious books, you know, a lot of self-help books. But this has really been a different time, and even for as far as a time of prayer, if you allow me to go that way. I come from a family that they believe strongly in prayer. And when there were crises going on, even in the family, they didn't hesitate to say, "Oh no, we're going to do a family fast. We're going to do a family prayer." You know, they weren't silent about prayer. They weren't afraid. They weren't ashamed to even take it publicly. And so the silence has really been different as far as someone saying, you know what, let's pray together. They'll say, pray for me, but let's pray together. That's been different. I believe God's voice is clear in the sense that he's bringing the whole nations with an S back to acknowledging him and knowing that there's something greater than them, their wealth, their power, their structure, their intellect. So that prayer thing has been really different because it's been very silent. I was sharing with Pastor. I said, you know, it's almost uneasy for me. I can't speak for anybody else because just the lack of the church world doing the prayers, you know, going on in the revivals, it's really been different. I believe the Lord he is speaking to the hearts of men, but he's speaking to the sinner as well as the Christian. You know, so yeah, it's been a different time. It's been a different
Absolutely.
time. And I'm just constantly talking to the Lord and asking God, you know, what direction, what do you want us to do? Yeah, you know, and I'm usually the first one to say, hey, let's go on a fast.
The first one.
Let's go on a fast. But I've just kind of been silent to see where, you know, again, you kind of, I think your dad used the great analogy about walking when you started walking. And then you get to a point where you let the child go and you say, okay, now we're going to see how good they're going to walk. We're going to see, you know, he bumped his head on the left side before and stubbed his toe before. Now that you've done all of this, let's see you now, you know. And I think that's kind of where we are with the church. It's like we've had 30-day fasts that the leadership has led.
Yes.
And we say, you know, let's go on our 30-day consecration. Let's go on our 30-day consecration. And people say, well, we're praying and fasting, but I haven't heard I haven't heard one say, you know what, we're praying and fasting, or let's pray and fast. Hey, yeah.
Absolutely.
So you just kind of see how people are walking now because the world needs the church. And what the church, at least here at Miracle Central, what I see that we've been drawing people that we don't know from without, even without the state, you know, so.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And you really, no, please.
No, I was going to say, I don't know if I wrapped that up or if that was kind of scattered.
No, you did. Yeah. And that points back to, you know, those earlier questions about tools. Diligence is an important tool. Patience is an important tool. And those are things that if we haven't learned that lesson in 2020, we really need to learn it now. We've gotten to a place in our world and in society and individually in our lives where going for the look has put us in trouble. Going for the optics and going for the dramatic flair and the visibility and going for the notoriety and the fame has put us in a hole. And now we've been stripped down to the essentials. Right. And it's an opportunity to build things up the right way on sure foundation, as you say. And that becomes absolutely key and critical because those are the things that give you the sustainability. Prayer is a seed that you put in the ground. And if you think about it, as powerful as water is, you can have floods and rivers and waterfalls and rain and monsoons, hurricanes. Compare a seed to the power of masses of water. A seed is so much more powerful because when you put a seed in the ground, it can produce a tree. But you can pour gallons and hundreds and thousands of gallons of water on soil that doesn't have a seed, and it just makes it muddy. So that seed in prayer, the seed in dedication, the seed in planning and building ministry the right way, and trying to impact people and impact this world the right way for the right reasons, that seed might not be appreciated by those who just like the optics. It's like, I'm overwatering my lawn, but I need to do some seeding. And I like getting out there and, I got this water hole. I'm, just making this big show of, watering my lawn. But if the seeds aren't in the soil, if those small, unappreciated, undetected, invisible seeds aren't in place, then it's all a show. And I think that's what we've seen in a way or another. People are overwatering. They're dumping gallons of water in these places where there's no real seeds, and those seeds aren't planted in good soil. And what you end up with is mud afterward, as opposed to flowers. Right. And I think that is something that you illuminated really well, Mom. We're going to see coming out of this who has really put that time into those seeds, the seed of prayer, the seed of planning, the seed of working on your relationship with God. And from that dedication, once all this is over and you turn that water hose off, I'm gonna look in the ground and either you're gonna have mud or there's gonna be some sprouting sooner or later.
That's right.
Certainly. Dad, we got some good time for you. We got 3 whole minutes. Dad, your thoughts and reactions to help us close.
We are operating in the now for the future. We don't know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. There's so many, actually, I'll look at myself. God, when you really love God and you really love Him, you have accepted the challenge, and you know that you have no control over the future. God wants you to operate 100% in the now. The future is going to speak for itself. So what we plant today, there's seed time and then harvest. A harvest is we're going to harvest the crop, but it's in the season of God. So God wants us to operate now, in the now, but it's for the future. I've learned as a leader, I've learned that this might sound strange coming from a pastor. I got 1 minute. Okay. My son, is it a COGIC man? All right. It might sound strange. You really don't know what you're doing until God co-signs for what you're doing. But He says, occupy till I come. The preaching and the teaching, you would think after a while, how long have we been here during this pandemic? It's over 100-some days.
Oh, yes. We started in March, I think.
If I knew the count, I could do this much better, my presentation. Okay. But we know it's been over 100 days. Now, if you sit back and say, okay, what have you accomplished in over 100 days? Me? Nothing. I don't know. Only the future holds that answer. Mm-hmm. The Lord told me, just do what I do. So we've been doing what we're doing, and we brought on an engineering crew. And what is interesting is that we are depending upon God. That's where God has always wanted us. And a lot of us have never been there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm done.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, this is an exciting start to season 2 of Chatting with the Chloes. I appreciate you all for being a part of this conversation. We're so appreciative.
Can I add this one thing?
Oh, please. Yes, sir.
Please. The Chatting with the Chloes. I believe that this is a time for a real conversation with real leaders that are in trench work, that are not looking for anything but for God saying, well done, my good and faithful servants. Leaders, it's when you can inspire and encourage somebody else through just what God has given to you. Do you not know it's free? No price tag. You can't put a price on the anointing of God. And your mother said, people have been touched literally across this nation through chatting with the Clays. Did we plan this? No. This wasn't planned for 2020. God ordained it. Is it a private conversation that we had? It used to be a private conversation within family. But now God has ordained this. He said, take it to the world. And so we're not here to see, and you won't be able to see how many or how much grain has been harvested. It's not our job. Our job is to encourage and motivate. And maybe there's a leader, maybe there's a pastor, maybe there's a pastor's wife, maybe there's a missionary, maybe there's a newlywed, maybe there's some PKs out there, maybe there's some fathers out there that they just needed that extra and God ordained it through chatting with the Clays, because it's the Lord's doing and it's marvelous in our eyes.
I can't say anything after that. That was our close for this season. The episode 1 of season 2 of Chatting with the Clays. That I wholeheartedly agree. I pray that this has been a blessing to someone, and I'm quite sure when it comes harvest time, these seeds will be counted among them. So I appreciate you all for bringing your thoughts and your hearts and sharing honestly and openly, and we look forward to the next episode. If you all aren't following already, what do they do, Mom?
Like and share.
Like and share. And then Dad, if you're on YouTube, what do you do?
Light it up.
Yeah, that's the other series. Hit that notification bell.
There you go.
Subscribe to this channel.
There you go.
Until next time, God bless you all.
You'll get it.
I'll call you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
My brothers and sisters, I pray that this was a blessing unto you. First Lady Clay, would you like to say anything?
Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell. Leave a comment. God bless.